No human in all of history decided one day that they wanted to domesticate the cat. No one woke up 10,000 years ago and thought, you know what would be a good idea? Take this independent, wary animal that does what it wants and clearly doesn't need anyone and turn it into a domestic animal. That never happened. And that's exactly why the story of cat domestication is the strangest, the most accidental, and the most perfectly ironic in the entire history of human-animal relations. Because in the end, it wasn't humans who domesticated cats, it was cats who domesticated humans. And it did so gradually, so silently, and so to its advantage that when humans realized what had happened, it was too late. But let's take it one step at a time, because to understand how the cat got to where it is, you need to understand what changed in human life that created the conditions for this improbable encounter. For 400,000 years, humans were nomadic. He broke camp, followed the animals, followed the seasons, followed the food, and in a nomadic world, there is no category called domestic animal, at least not in the way we know it. You can't domesticate something you're not willing to carry with you wherever you go. And a cat, as anyone who has ever lived with one knows, is the last creature on the planet that accepts being carried everywhere. We managed to domesticate a dog. The process began at least 15,000 years ago, possibly 20. It all started when wolves approaching human camps discovered that food scraps were a reliable resource. Wolves more tolerant of humans survived better. Wolf pups raised by humans became hunting partners. Over generations, the wolf transformed into a dog, increasingly dependent, increasingly attuned to humans, increasingly unable to live without them. The cat is a completely different story, and the difference begins about 10,000 years ago with the most transformative invention in human history, agriculture. When humans stopped following food and started producing food, everything changed. The first agricultural civilizations of the Fertile Crescent in the region of Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Jordan, and Israel began cultivating wheat and barley. And with cultivation came a problem these humans had never faced before: what to do with the surplus food. For the first time in human history, there was more food than the group could eat immediately, and it needed to be stored. And this need for storage created the problem that nature had been waiting millennia to explore. Rodents, rats, and mice discovered that these strange bipedal animals had created, from a rodent's perspective, paradise. Abundant food protected only by mud walls that sharp teeth could pierce without much difficulty. And where there are abundant rodents, there is something that eats abundant rodents: the African and Middle Eastern wildcat. Felis silvestris libica was and still is one of the most efficient rodent hunters that evolution has ever produced. And this cat discovered that human settlements were a feast, a concentration of prey that didn't exist in any natural environment, a permanent buffet of rats and mice, without competition, with shelter built by others, with additional food scraps being discarded by the humans themselves. The cat wasn't summoned, it wasn't captured, it wasn't raised in captivity and then released. It appeared on its own because humans, unknowingly, had created the perfect conditions for this animal to decide that human proximity was the best option available. We delve deep into stories that seem simple and hide twists like this every week. And here begins the part that makes the cat's story genuinely different from any other domestication. When the cat appeared, humans didn't try to domesticate it, nor did they need to, because the cat was doing something immediately useful. It was killing the rodents that were destroying the grain stalks, which were literally the difference between having food for the winter and not having any. So, the human response to the cat that appeared on its own was to leave it be. Don't try to catch it, don't try to raise it, don't try to train it. Just don't scare it away, because the cat that's there is working, and it's working better than any trap the human had invented. The initial step wasn't domestication, it was tolerance, and that tolerance was enough for the process to begin. Cats more tolerant of humans, those that could stay close without panicking, that could eat leftovers without running away, that could patrol the grain warehouse without stressing about the constant human presence. These cats had access to more food, ate better, were healthier, and had more kittens, and these offspring inherited tolerance towards humans. This natural selection is operating within an environment artificially created by humans. Humans didn't choose which cats reproduced. The environment that humans created chose, and has been choosing over generations, the cat that didn't run away, that didn't attack, that could coexist. The first archaeological sites showing cats in a human context are approximately 0 years old and are exactly where you would expect, in the Fertile Crescent, in the first large agricultural settlements. And the way the cat skeleton appears in these sites is revealing. Not as hunted prey, not as an animal slaughtered for food or fur, but as an animal that lived in the settlement. The bones show signs of natural aging, suggesting cats that died old in the area, not slaughtered young. The most dramatic case is that of the Shillourokambos archaeological site in Cyprus, which is about 9,500 years old. A human burial was found with a cat buried alongside it in a position suggesting tossing the animal was intentionally buried next to its owner. Cyprus is 70 kilometers from the mainland. Wild cats don't swim to Cyprus. This cat was brought by humans, meaning that 9,500 years ago, there was already a close enough relationship between humans and cats for the human to carry the animal on a sea voyage and then bury it with honor. That's affection. That's bonding. This happened without any conscious domestication program. It happened because utility created proximity. Proximity created coexistence, and coexistence created something neither side had planned. The cat, in turn, made small adjustments over generations, which were less about behavior and more about communication. The meow, for example, is practically non-existent in cat-to-cat communication in nature. Wild adult cats don't meow at each other. They use scent, posture, and a series of specific vocalizations for conflict or reproduction. The meow was developed, selected, and refined to communicate with humans. It's literally a language that cats invented to talk to our species. And the frequency of the meow bioacoustic studies show this. It's surprisingly close to the frequency of a human baby's cry, not by accident, because the frequency that most immediately awakens a response of attention and care in adult humans is exactly that. The cat evolved to press the exact button that activates human care. Purring is another communicative creation. It has a frequency between 20 and 150 Hz that researchers have discovered has a measurable effect on reducing stress, lowering blood pressure, and accelerating bone healing in humans. It's not a therapeutic metaphor, it's physics. And the cat has discovered, over millennia of coexistence, that purring near humans increases the likelihood of receiving attention, food, and protection. The fascinating thing is that humans still don't know exactly at what stage of domestication the cat is. It's very different from the dog, which has been genetically and behaviorally transformed so profoundly that it is completely dependent on humans for survival. Domestic cats, when placed in the wild, can fend for themselves, hunt, survive, form colonies, and haven't developed the total dependence that dogs have. This has led researchers to propose that cats are not fully domesticated. They are in a process that experts call semi-domestication, incomplete domestication, or even self-directed domestication. They chose to approach, they chose to stay, but they preserved enough of their wild nature to be able to choose to leave if conditions changed. They are the only domestic species that has kept this option open. And that's why cats today seem to do what they want, when they want, with whom they want, because, evolutionarily speaking, that's exactly what they've done from the beginning. They are cooperating with you to the extent that they think it's worthwhile to cooperate. And we, who have spent the whole of history thinking we domesticated the cat, that it's our animal, that we trained and molded it for our coexistence, are actually the second to have reached this agreement. The cat arrived first, chose the terms, and agreed to stay as long as it stayed on its terms. Do you still think you're the one in charge of the cat? Tell me in the comments, and also tell me if your cat acts as if it knows all about this pidai.